Throughout my years of playing this game, I have seen the phrase, "I can't do X without the gear," an innumerable amount of times. On my video comments, on other people's video comments, and on some of the most depraved corners of the internet. Well, I've got some news for you folks. I've run the numbers, I've done the math, and the results are in. If you've said this before, you're a bitch, but that's okay, I was too, and we can fix it and grow stronger together. So take my hand, friends, and learn with me on today's episode of Gear Cope. I've tried to record this like 5 or 6 times, and I've gotten interrupted every single time. So let's give this one final go here. First things first, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's. I hope you're all having a wonderful time of year, spending it with loved ones, enjoying this sadly fleeting atmosphere that brings us all together around this time of year. And if you're not, please know that whether you like it or not, someone out there cares very deeply for you, even if they're not expressing it every second of every day. You are loved, never forget that. With that shit out of the way, fuck this bug. I have had some trouble recording, both in timing, getting interrupted, build layout, strange glitches, which as I'm recording this, I'm learning that these have existed since like week 1 and have been known about, but what the fuck ever, I guess. So here's the gist. Welcome to Gear Cope, folks. This is a series where we pick a boss and kill it with 3 different gear setups. Basically best in slot, where I don't have a maxed bank, but we're gonna get as close to best in slot gear as possible. Bond baby, where we buy gear that is roughly in the ballpark for the price of a bond, and use that to set up our gear, right? I don't recommend buying a bond to subsidize your gear, but hey, some people would rather work at McDonald's than play the game, I get it. Best moneymaker an hour is 15 bucks an hour at McDonald's, right? And finally, broke bitch, where I just get real stupid with it and try to get as close to broke as I think is viable. And I got a little excessive with this one. We'll talk about it in a bit. In addition to that, we act like a bunch of dorks and we look at the calculations between these 3 setups to get a good idea as to why, and say it with me, gear does not matter. We have done Vard, we have done Leviathan, and by popular request, we are now doing the Doom of Mokaedel, or Osto Ayak, or just Doom if you're tired of these goofy fucking names. Let's talk about our gear setups, okay? The thing that we care about the most in all these gear setups is time to kill, okay? That's how we're measuring the effectiveness of this, right? DPS is just a fucking number, accuracy, whatever. This game is gambling. Time to kill on average is what we're looking at. For a best in slot, I don't have Zerite Vine Braces. It's not something that I care to buy and upgrade on my account right now. And then I leave the ring slot blank because you would be bringing a light bearer generally, even in the best in slot for faster DPS. With that, we're seeing it's about 60 seconds to kill a Delve level 9, and those times stay pretty much consistent throughout all levels from level 1 up to 8. For Bond baby, this took a little bit of deliberation. I'll be flashing on screen, and also we're doing something a little different this time. I'm just kind of rambling through all of my notes here. I've actually gotten a little organized. I'm not just spewing random bullshit while I try to kill the bosses. We're just gonna run the clips in the background, talk about these calculations. You can see for yourself as we talk about it. I'll point out anything that's necessary, I feel like, but yeah, let me know if you like this style a little bit better. Anywho, Bond baby, after a little bit of deliberation, I decided to go with just a Scobo and Void. Okay, why did I do this? I did this for a number of reasons. Right now, it technically is more expensive than a Bond. It's like 16 mil, and a Bond is 14 mil. But on December 1st, it was 13 mil for a Tormented Synapse, and a Bond was 14.5. So you would have walked away with 1.5 mil extra had you done the Bond baby method back then, right? So in a sense, we're backdating this a month, but why else? Why else would I do that? I noticed it with the Leviathan setup, and it was even more apparent with this one, but if I went for a 15 mil budget setup at Doom, the only difference is going to be I'm wearing a Fury instead of a Glory, I'm wearing an Odium Ward instead of a Holy Book, and I'm wearing a Dragon Crossbow instead of a Rune Crossbow. And the DPS is pretty much the same. I mean, it's very, very, very close. And so I have to question, like, are we really showing off like 3 different gear setups, or are we showing off best in slot and then basically the same 2 gear setups at the bottom end? And so for Doom especially, where Synapse is easy to obtain, right? It's very, very cheap, and it shows like it's an actual true middle ground between the 3 setups. So I decided to go with that instead for these kills. Hope you'll understand. I feel like, and this was another comment too. Someone said, I feel like depending on the boss, you should be like scaling the prices of these brackets to that boss, right? Like if you've made it to Doom and you don't have 15 mil in your bank, what the fuck are you doing, right? Or if you're an Iron Man and you've made it to Doom and you don't have at least 1 Synapse yet, like some progression is a little weird there. I don't really know how I want to do it in the future, but I'll try and scale it a little bit better. Still keeping things close to around a Bond, but I'm going to try and get that middle bracket a little bit more middle, than it was before. And then finally for Broke Bitch, we're down here with Rune Crossbow and rubies. This is admittedly like ridiculously low gear. I'll throw a price check up on screen here, but the gear itself was like under 100k, and then I bought way too many fucking bolts, but like even the bolts were just like 300k each, okay? Like this was a stupid budget setup that I did with this, okay? I don't recommend, like if you're gonna do this, I do not recommend going past 4, 5, or 6, right? Once you start getting to 7 to 8 where things are getting too fast and you're juggling a lot of different mechanics at once, the DPS does feel pretty damn slow, and unless you're like locked in the entire time, no one wants to be doing 2 or 3 balls. I only wound up doing 2, but no one wants to be doing 2 ball phases at Doom level 8 plus, right? And then you'll notice in the clips here that I have diamond bolts as well. Okay, for those of you who are familiar, in order to keep things like just contained to comparing gear, I don't bring extra switches that aren't necessary. Obviously, you know, for those of you who know Doom, we have the Demon Bane stuff in there, and we'll talk about that. But I don't bring spec weapons, and I don't bring switches that are like unnecessary in order to keep things like as sterile as possible. So why am I bringing a diamond bolt switch? Well, as I was bitching about earlier, there's a couple of glitches that I can see why the spaghetti code works this way, and I can understand it. I don't condone it. It should be fixed. But if you have a ruby bolt and it procs on either the totem for the ball phase or on the ranged larva, it does 0 damage. And so I wound up getting to like wave 8 2, 3 times, I want to say, and dying before I realized what was going on. And here's a screenshot of the ruby bolt proccing on the totem, right? I click the totem and I'm starting to juggle the balls and do all these things, and then I realized there's no ball to protect me. What's going on? I had to look back and went, oh holy shit, the ruby bolt procced on the totem and did 0 damage for some reason. And then the same thing happens with the larva, right? So I'm trying to kill the ranged larva, or the big ranged larva, and the ruby bolt procs, and I'm counting in my head, you know, 4 hits or 6 hits or 2 hits or whatever it's required, and I'm like, wait just a second here, why isn't it dead? And that's because it's a ruby bolt proc, and for whatever reason it nulls the damage. Not to get all stupid nerdy, but I imagine that the larva and the totems have, quote, infinite health or something along those lines, and it just looks for hit checks, right? It looks for 1 hit from a demonic or 2 hit from any other ranged weapon. And so when the ruby bolt procs, it's like taking 10% of infinity, which just nulls the 0, or which nulls the damage and puts out a 0. That would be my guess. I don't fucking know. I wish it was fixed. I'm like reading chat messages right now of me bitching in Discord and people being like, no, that's been around since week 1, brother. That's just the game. So some other things to talk about with Doom and why this was kind of a weird one. Doom is hard to calculate because it's got different phases, right? It's got the shield phase, it's got the car phase, it's got the regular phase. If you were just sitting there and dealing 600 damage, and that's what these calculations are looking at, if you were just sitting there and dealing 625 damage over the course of this time, it checks DPS versus health, it would put out, you know, 60 seconds, 80 seconds, 120 seconds, whatever these calcs are. Yeah, 60 seconds, 80 seconds, 120 seconds, right? Because you have different phases, things get skewed and pretty wish-washy. You have a 100% accuracy phase with the car phase, and so you're a lot more likely to ruby bolt proc there because you're not missing, right? And so you get some good rubies during that time. And then Twisted Bow, you know, has a huge spread. It can wind up hitting up to like 80s or some shit like that. But then during the rest of the phase, you know, because the accuracy is so low, the DPS tends to spread out a little bit, and so you get kind of some weird. It's the point I'm trying to say is it's incredibly hard to calculate, and so this is definitely the weirdest boss that we've done and probably will do. Honest to God, outside of Coliseum, which is in the works right now. I'd like to go back to something a little easier, okay, something more realistic, right? I don't expect the people who are watching this. I'm gearing gear cope towards people who are, you know, not into PVM yet, and I'm not trying to convince people to go into Doom with 100k if they're not into PVM yet. You know, they should be practicing on something a little bit easier, maybe DT2 bosses or lower. So I'm gonna take a quick break and try and do that. Do something a little bit more realistic than Doom with 100k or Coliseum with 10k. Get a couple of those videos out, but then I'll be back with something stupid, don't worry. Anyway, point is, Doom is probably going to be the hardest one to calculate, simply because of all the phase transitions and how unique of a boss it is. And so we are going to see some huge, like very skewed times when we look at it towards the end here. On this note, I touched on it already. Like I said, I'm just going down my list here, but no special attack weapons or extra weapons as per usual, bringing Skull Scepter and Arc Light due to how this boss works. So for those of you who don't know, So you have to have a melee weapon, and you have to have a ranged weapon, and you have to have a mage weapon to kill the larvae as they come out. And you can either hit them twice, back to back, with a regular weapon, or you can one-shot them with a Demon Bane weapon. Now, given that Skill Scepter is free and Arclight is free, if you've done the quest, I mean, those two are just, you have, like, there's no reason not to bring them. You would bring them in every single setup, and so I made the exception, because of, again, all the mechanics in this boss, I made the exception and said, yeah, we're taking that shit with, okay? And then for my best in slot gear, I did bring a Scobo, only to one-shot the larva, because if you're best in slot, there's no reason you wouldn't have it for that boss, right? So, all right, I'm gonna kick myself for this one. I didn't grab the times for the broke bitch setup, okay? Like, I got the full recording, and we're gonna skip around through it here as I'm talking. I forgot to grab the times. I got the time at the end. It was 18 minutes and 60 milliseconds, so a tick. It was 18 minutes and a tick. I had a note to myself to grab the times, to grab the wave times, but then I finished it, and I went, oh, fuck, finally. And I logged out and went, fuck, that wiped the times from my game screen. So if we are just nice about it, or average it about it, you know, we can take 18 minutes divided by 8 waves and get like an average of 2 minutes and 15 seconds as an average time for each wave. Obviously, it's different. It varies, you know. Did we get Ruby Bolt procs? Was there a car phase with, you know, with 100% accuracy, that kind of shit? But it's just a hair lower than what we expect with the Calx, right? 118 seconds to kill with a rune crossbow, 2 minutes 15 seconds. I contribute that to, you know, tick loss, the weirdness of the boss, all that kind of shit. Point is we came in, clocked around just about what we'd expect with the rune crossbow, but I do apologize for not having the individual times. But what do the individual times matter? Why do we give a fuck, right? The final point I really want to make about Mocha here is, with previous videos and future videos, we're going to be taking an average of like 3, 4, 5 KC, depending on the boss, per budget setup, or per gear bracket, and we're going to kind of average those out and see like how things compare and contrast. Like with Leviathan, we saw that sometimes even the budget gear beat out Biss, or sometimes the Bond Baby failed to the budget gear, or clearly failed to the Biss gear, you know? And just see like there's some wiggle room here. And something that's brought up a lot in the comments is that over a long period of time, this gear disparity will start to, you know, it'll average out, and you'll start to see the real loss of time, because on average, you know, you're 20% slower, and so over like 1,000 kills, you know, that's quite a bit of time lost. And I talked about it last video too, but my argument to that, of course, is that you should be making money by the time you get to those 1,000 kills, right? I've got where's the screen grab? Let me take a peek here. Yeah, there's a level 5 here with 0 untradables, right? A level 5 complete, and it's got 2 teleports in it, which bumps me up to 880k. And that was with the rune crossbow stuff, right? Like wave 5, 10 minutes of investment is basically 1,000,000 gold. So at that point, after investing 100k in gear, like you now have 1,000,000. You just 10x'd your fucking profits, right? And so that disparity of how much time you spend on a boss will shrink and shrink and shrink as you continue to do the boss, because you are continuing to get loot. And Doom is one of those phenomenal bosses where, I mean, even with a rune crossbow, like I said, stop at like wave 6 or 7, and the unique chance isn't great, but I mean, if you're in there with a fucking rune crossbow or some like real budget gear, even a Demon Bane weapon, man, like you can still make some considerable money, and you start getting uniques at wave 2, right? The drop rates are low, but you're still getting uniques at wave 2. So if we look at the waves as individual bosses as opposed to all of Doom at once, then you will, you know, see that there's really not that much difference in the waves. But of course, as we do 8 waves per kill here, we do see that there is a disparity there, because, you know, you're losing 5% per wave, 5%, 10% time per wave, and then that starts to add up over time. Lose 20 seconds here, lose 20 seconds there, lose 20 seconds here, you're going to start to see over a long period of time. But leave at wave 5, leave at wave 6, take a mill here and there, you're going to be destroying that disparity in no time. The whole point of Gear Cope is to explain to you that you can get in there with whatever the fuck you have in your bank right now. And then, of course, my favorite thing is the death fee. I don't know that I grabbed a screenshot of it. Let me check here. I didn't grab a screenshot, but that's okay. I know what it was. 3,000 gold. In the completely budget setup, it was 3,000 gold, man. 3,000 gold. So there's no reason for you to really worry about death fees. I mean, you're quite literally only spending money on supplies at that point. And That's the wonderful thing about going in as a broke bitch, is dying isn't a 500k hit to your bank. Dying is nothing. It's just practice is all it is. I'm now realizing we didn't actually sit and talk about numbers that much. I'm sure I've flashed the calcs on screen by now, but you can see that the time to kill is 60 seconds for Twisted Bow, 80 seconds for Scorching Bow, and 120 seconds for Rune Crossbow. So you're seeing about a 33% loss in DPS every single time that you bump down a bracket here, which does, as I said, it achieves a nice kind of even spread between the 3 brackets that I was going for and looking for. But again, these are just rough numbers. You can really expect, like 20 seconds and 40 seconds of time loss between the brackets respectively. I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say here. I kind of wish I did. I want this video to be longer and really dive into it, but there's really not much else to say. I had a lot of fun doing this. It's really neat to kind of stretch the legs and go down with budget gear. And I understand that most people aren't going to have the skill to come and do Doom with a Rune Crossbow. I think it's fun to get in there. You could probably get through waves 2 or 3 if you're in a bracket like that. But the point of this again is not to say you can do Doom with the Rune Crossbow. Get in there, dumbass. You know, it's not that. It's the message that if you really want to do any piece of content, you can hop in there and start practicing today. There's no reason not to. If you want money, then go get that bag, brother. Making that YouTube gamer bread over here. Yeah, I don't know. I love you all very much. Tell me in the comments, what are we doing next? If you made it this far, please like the video. Liking shows it to like 10 more people or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't really give a shit. Like the video, leave comments, engagement, yada yada yada. All right. Hey folks, guess what? I remembered what I forgot to do. I forgot to compare the times, okay? So here we are at the end where we forgot. We're just saying hello. Please ignore all that shit. For the broke bitch, we're doing 215 as the average, right? For best in slot, we're looking at 106 and 106.6 for Delves 1 and 2. Then it starts getting a little bit slower as more mechanics show up, right? 140 and 140 for 3 and 4. Then 160 and 130 for 5 and 6, and finally 130 and 140 for 7 and 8. So we're looking at between the first 2 are usually pretty free, but we're looking at basically a minute 30 to 2 minutes for our times for best in slot. Moving on to Bond Baby. Funny enough, we actually got even faster times with the Scopo in wave 1, but 103 and 53, and then a minute 30 and 2 minutes, and then wave 5 was a minute 20. Wave 6 we pushed over a little bit, right? So 2:30. 7 again 154, so 2 minutes, and then Delve 8 was a minute 35 or a minute 37 there. And so we can see that even between just Scobo and Biss, we have a pretty similar spread, right? You'd really expect it to be worse, going from a 2 billion gold setup down to a 15 million gold setup with the the Scobo, but that's really not the case. And then even down to a 10,000 gold setup or a 100,000 gold setup with the Rune Crossbow, you're tacking 15 to 45 seconds onto those times, which again, as we discussed already in the video, does add up over time, but really not that huge of a difference when you're taking it wave by wave, or in any other case, boss by boss. So there's your last little 2 minutes towards the end. Sorry, I forgot about that. Mwah.